welcome to a matinee edition of the Mike to New Haven podcast. This is episode 145. It's interesting because the guy I'll be speaking with today, who I'll introduce in a moment, is in the introduction that you see on YouTube and, of course, on LinkedIn if you're watching as well. So welcome, everybody. Like I said, episode 145. Episode 144 was Tony Giorgio, retired lieutenant who ran the NYPD's ceremonial unit. Very good guy and an interesting look at what they do. And Phil Grimaldi is here today. Phil Grimaldi, of course, a police off the cuff, real crime stories with Bill Cannon, does a great job. Always fun watching him. He was on this show originally back in August, but we had such a good conversation that hit on so many different things naturally. And this is the sign that you had a good conversation. You miss a few things. And so I said, Phil, I want to bring you back because there was one thing that we forgot to talk about, of which he'll be doing most of the talking today. I'll just be a bystander and listening in. And that was a car chase that he had early on in his career, but not just any kind of car chase. Phil, to give you a little background on him, is a big fan of the movie from 1971, The French Connection, which is, as he discussed when he was on the show the first time, his inspiration, or one of his inspirations at least, to becoming a New York City police officer and then later on detective. And there's an iconic car chase in that movie that he kind of had a real life version of. And today he rejoins the show to take us through that chase and tell us all about it. Phil, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you for having me back, Mike. I saw the intro and I didn't know that I was in that. That was I'm very flattered. Thank you very much for putting me in there.
Oh, you're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. Good to have you back. So this car chase, this is, I think, what was it? It was 82 or 86?
No, it was 1985 actually.
All right.
It was March 1st, 1985. But I got to give a little bit of a background. Like you said, I was inspired to become a police officer basically by, I had an uncle who was a police officer, my Uncle Frank Tomasino. And, I was very in tune with his police stories, his war stories. And he used to make us, me and my brother, handle his gun. He would unload it and make us handle it and stuff like that, obviously safely. So, that kind of gave me the itch to get into law enforcement. And then, like you said, 1971, the movie The French Connection hit the theaters, and everybody was talking about it. There was a buzz through the neighborhood. My older brother had gone to see it with his friends. So me and a couple of my friends, we wanted to go, but we were too young. I think you had to be 16 or 13 or whatever it was. And so we said, let's try and go to the theater. Maybe we'll get somebody to sneak us in. So there was a couple, and we said, would you buy us the tickets? They were like, yeah, sure. And so we got into the theater, we saw the movie, and just a great, tremendous movie. And obviously the iconic car chase is really like the highlight of that movie. And it's probably one of the better chase scenes in movies over the decades of movies. I guess the other one that everybody talks about, I can't think of the actor's name, but it was a very famous car chase with a muscle car, basically. But this was really a situation where Gene Hackman commandeers a car after he's shot at, and he winds up going through areas of Brooklyn that I grew up in, and I remember when it was actually being filmed in that area, kind of like Gravesend, Bensonhurst border. But it's a pretty wild car chase. So you fast forward to 1982. I become a police officer. I land in the 70 precinct, 1983. I hook up with a partner by the name of Charlie Martini, and another very close friend of mine till this day, Joey Calderera, who actually retired as a lieutenant. So a couple of years later, 1985, we're in anti-crime. Now, Charlie was my partner, but Joe Calderera, who I was very close with, he worked in the other team. He had switched his tour that day. I guess he was doing either a court tour or whatever it was. Anyway, the three of us are out on patrol doing plainclothes anti-crime. And it was one of those days that, it was a cold winter, and it was like one of the first nice days. The sun was out, snow was melting. And so the three of us in the car, and the car that we were using, you were allowed to use your own private car. Anti-crime would have one or two cars assigned to it. And if there were two or three teams, obviously, there would be a lack of a vehicle to use. So you would use your own car. Now, my mother had like this beat up Chevy. It was a Chevy Malibu. I think it was like a 76 or a 77 maroon, had a few dents in it. So it blended into, the 70 precinct, East Flatbush area, blended in very well. So we turn out and we're driving around, and it must have been, I think we were doing a 10 to 6 that day. and it was March 1st, 1985, like I said. So it wasn't long after we were out in the field. We were looking for a collar, either a GLA, which is a stolen car, or we were monitoring the radio, let's say for robberies or whatever. So we started to drive towards the north end of the precinct, and we wound up just on the border between the 70 and the 66, up near Fort Hamilton Parkway. There's a Burger King up that way, and there's a car wash over there. And I just happened to notice as we were waiting at a light, I saw a car pass us, and it was two young guys in the car, two young Hispanic males, and it was I think it was a Chevy Caprice, probably about a 77 Chevy Caprice, and the car was all dirty. And I was thinking to myself, geez, the car wash is right here. There's these two young guys. It's a beautiful day after we had a crappy winter. I said they'd be driving around in a clean car. They would have ran it through the car wash, or it would have been clean, right? So I was driving, and I tell my partner Charlie, who was next to me, I said, run the plate on that car. And he's like, why? I said, I don't know. It looks a little suspicious. The two young guys, and the car is all dirty. The windows, you can barely see through them. He said, what are you, crazy? I said, run the plate. So Joe Cal, who was in the back, actually, no, I think Joe Cal was in the back, and Charlie was in the passenger seat. It was a two-door car. Anyway, he runs the plate, and Central, normally when you run a plate, they'll say it's if it's not stolen, they'll say 17 Sprint awaiting the final, meaning the car's not stolen. Now, if Central has something pops up on a screen that it's it's wanted on felonies or something like that, the first thing she says or he says, what's your location? So when he ran the plate, he said 70 anti-crime, and he shouted out the plate number, and within 2, 3, 4 seconds, Central came back and said 70 crime, what's your location? So I knew right then and there that this was going to be either a stolen car or a vehicle that was wanted in connection with felonies. Sure enough, we gave our location, and Central said that car is wanted in numerous purse snatch robberies. So we knew we had it was stolen car, and we knew that we had a felony warrant on the car. So we started to radio. They had no idea that we were behind them. As I said, the car was blended in perfectly. So we started to follow them for a few blocks, and we're radioing our locations, and we're trying to get other cars to get into the area to cut this guy off. We wind up on Church Avenue and Day Hill Road. We were going back into the confines of the 70 precinct. And when we come to this light, they're stopped at the light, and they were like facing southbound. And we see a radio car on the corner, a marked radio car. And we're thinking that they're responding to our request for assistance, for backup. So, and now we can't pick up the radio and talk into it like this, because if the guy looks in the rearview mirror, he sees somebody talking on the radio, he's going to realize the police are behind us. So my partner is trying to radio, and he's doing it from, he had the radio down on his lap, and he's kind of like talking down. So Joe Cal, who was in the back, he tells, he says, all right, I'll radio that radio car. So he says, guys, when the light changes, cut the guy off. Sure enough, the light changes. They were on another job, whether they had their radios on or they weren't even paying attention. The guy continued down Day Hill Road. We were behind him. And, I could hear Joe Cal in the back, guys, get him. That's the car. That's the vehicle, and he had given a complete description. It was like a navy blue Chevy Caprice. So now we drive another couple of blocks, and we stop for another light. And I said, you know what, guys, let's just take him. So my partner, Charlie, jumps out of the car on the passenger side. Now I'm going to stay with the car. Joe Cal's trying to get out of the back seat. And when Charlie started to approach the car, he had his badge was on a chain around his neck, and it must have flopped out. The guy must have saw it. And Joe Cal's getting out at the same time, and the guy just blows through the light, and he takes off. So Joe Cal jumps into the passenger seat of the car. Now, I can't stop to pick up Charlie. Charlie's out of the car. And I just start chasing these guys, and we start putting over. We're in pursuit. So now they start to snake around a few blocks, and there's at that time there were tow trucks. We used to call them chase trucks. They would monitor the police frequencies with scanners, and if there was a car accident, we would the radio call for a car accident was a 1053. So they would monitor for car accidents 1053s, and they would show up at the scene and try and get the work to tow the cars if the cars weren't drivable or whatever, and they would solicit the people to take their car and bring it to the collision shop. So they were very in tune with what was going on, with the police frequencies. And a lot of times, if there were chases, they would actually join in the chase. So sure enough, we're chasing these guys, and the guy's really being reckless. And we snake around, and he winds up going not towards the 70 precinct. He winds up going into like Borough Park. Now, we got to a point on 39th Street, and like I think it was maybe 13th Avenue, and it was a pretty big intersection. And the tow truck goes to cut the guy off, and the guy swerves, and he crashes into a parked car on the corner of 39th Street and 13th Avenue. And I could see he hit the car, but not bad. And he was trying to back up. So I take the car that I was driving, and I hit his rear tire to try and blow out the tire. And I back up, and I hit it a second time, and he's like jammed in. And what I didn't realize is as I was hitting him this way. The car just got clear now in the front of the car that he had crashed into. So now he cleared, the tire didn't blow out, and he starts racing down 13th Avenue. So now we're radioing, we're still in pursuit, and there's other radio cars behind us. There were 4 cops on horses. There would be a mounted patrol along 13th Avenue. So there were 4 cops on horses. They were up by, let's say, 42nd Street, 43rd Street. Now we were on 39th Street. So it was just a few blocks down. They heard the chase that we were now going south on 13th Avenue towards the higher numbers. So they took the horses, the 4 horses, and they blocked the street. So as we started to go down 13th Avenue, and you could see the horses in the distance, that the street was blocked off like this, I just saw, like at the same time that I noticed the horses, I just saw from the car that we were chasing, a big puff of black smoke came out of the tailpipe, meaning that the guy had nailed the gas and he was racing towards these horses. So now the horses, obviously, with the mounted officers on them, realize this guy's not stopping. He's going to try and crash into the horses. They start to back up. One of the horses bucks and throws the police officer off the horse. He hits the ground, and, the guy just blows past them. So we continue to chase. And the radio car that was behind us now stops to aid the officer that was thrown off his horse. So I think it was at 46th or 47th Street. He makes a right turn down a block going from 13th Avenue towards 12th Avenue. Now, mind you, during the early part of the chase, a couple of times the tow truck had cut the guy off and hit into him. And then, like I said, he had spun out. So he had already engaged in 3 or 4 accidents where he struck vehicles. Now he turns down this block, and, this is a pretty high-speed chase, and the block is kind of busy. The garbage truck had come down the block and collected garbage. So there were like a lot of garbage pails in the street. And towards the end of the block, towards 12th Avenue, there was the garbage truck and there was traffic. There was 3 or 4 cars backed up. So the guy realizes, the driver of the vehicle, his name was Johnny Rios. And the passenger who was with him was Frank Cintron. They turned out to be 2 crack addicted individuals that had gone on this purse snatching spree.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, they were jumping out of the stolen car. We learned later on they would jump out of the stolen car. If they observed a woman walking on the street, usually it would be an elderly woman. They'd jump out, grab the purse, jump back in the car, pilfer the purse, and take the money, the credit cards, whatever it was. When we eventually recovered the car at the end of the chase, there was a bunch of purses in the trunk of the car. But anyhow, let me get back to when they turned down the block. So like I said, there were garbage pails. The guy started hitting garbage pails. And when he realized that further up the block, there was the traffic backup, there was the sanitation truck. And then beyond the sanitation truck, there was cars stopped for the stop sign. So he mounts the sidewalk on the right. First, he goes on the left side of the sidewalk. He mounts the sidewalk and he starts to drive down, and he's hitting garbage pails. He took out a fence. I go right down the sidewalk behind him, and he goes back into the street. Now he sees, because he had gotten around the garbage truck. And there's, like real melee and panic on the street. People are coming out and screaming, and thank God he didn't hit any individuals. No human beings had been struck as of this point. So now he gets back into the street. He continues down a little further, and he sees that there's traffic up at the corner at the stop sign. There's like 2 or 3 cars stopped for the stop sign. So now he mounts the sidewalk on the right side of the street, and as he mounts on that side of the street, we're maybe 5 or 6 car lengths down from the corner. He goes back into the street, and of course he hit something, and he couldn't. I don't know if he hit a garbage pail, but he couldn't get down any further. He goes back into the street, and now he's stuck because there's, like I said, 3 or 4 cars backed up from the stop sign, and he's back into the street. He can't go nowhere. So now Joe and I jump out of the car, and we start to approach the vehicle, obviously with our guns out. Now, I stopped back maybe 3 or 4 car lengths from the car. I wanted to give room because I didn't know what this guy's next move was. So when we jump out of the car, we start to run towards the vehicle. All I remember seeing was the reverse lights come on, the black puff of smoke comes out of the tailpipe, and before I could even make a move, I get pushed from the right from Joe, my partner, Joe Calderera, pushes me out of the way. I go to the left, and the car just goes flying past me like in a split second. 1 second or 2 seconds more, I probably would have been under the car. He pushed me. He went to the right. Now that the guy backed up, because couldn't get back onto the sidewalk from where he was, he cleared a spot. There was a driveway. He goes back onto the sidewalk again. And now as he's driving down to try and make the corner, I will never forget this as long as I live. It's like it happened yesterday, and it's over 30 years ago. There's a woman pushing a baby carriage, and she's got one hand on the carriage, and she's got one hand on a toddler. There was an infant in the carriage, and there was a toddler in her right hand. And we start to scream, "Look out, look out." And she turns and she sees the car racing down at her. In one swoop, she grabs the toddler and she grabs the carriage, and she gets the baby out of the carriage, and she dives onto a parked car. It was something like an Olympic athlete could have learned something from this woman. But I guess the instincts of being scared that she was about to be run over. This guy was not stopping. Her children were her priority, obviously. She dives onto the car. The car goes flying past her. And now there's the stop sign on the corner, and there's an old man with a cane, and he's getting ready to cross. And we're screaming, "Look out, look out." And like I said, he was facing this way now, and he's getting ready to cross the intersection in the crosswalk. And when we start to scream, "Look out, look out," he turns this way. The guy hits the stop sign, and the stop sign goes crashing down and just narrowly misses him. And now he makes it to 12th Avenue, and he takes off down 12th Avenue towards the higher numbers. Now, Joe is trying to help the woman. I run out into the middle of 12th Avenue. Now, my car is maybe 5, 6 car lengths back. I have my shield out. I have my gun out, and I start flagging down the first car that I see. Now, the first car that I see, now the car that we were chasing was like I said, it was either 77, 78 Chevy Caprice Classic 4-door navy blue. The first car that stops, it's Borough Park. It's 2 Hasidic Jews. And I flagged down, I got my gun in my hand, and I'm going like this. The car comes to a screeching halt. The passenger doesn't see my badge. The passenger thinks he's being robbed, and he takes off running. So I tell the driver, "I need a police emergency. I need your car." And I pull him out of the car. And he's like, "Where you going with my car?" I said, "I need your car. I need your car." And I take him out. He goes, "I'm coming with you." And he tries to get into the back seat. And I said, "No, you're not." I jump into the car, and I throw it into gear, and I just take off. Now, the car is a 70. I'm sorry. I said it was a 70. It was maybe in the 80s, the car that we were chasing, maybe in 1980. This was a 1980 navy blue Pontiac Bonneville. Looked very similar to the car that we were chasing. So now, in this confusion of me commandeering the vehicle, I lose sight of the car. I see he turns down a block going towards the lower number, towards 11th Avenue, and I start to race after him. So now, we're putting it over the radio. We're still in pursuit. Joe's transmitting. They start trying to, the radio cars start trying to cut me off. So the chase is terminated and the guys get away. And so now I go back to the scene. Joe is like almost having a panic attack. He winds up, he's in the back of an ambulance. I'm like, Joe, are you okay? Did you get hurt? No, I'm all right. Everything's calming down. So the bosses show up, and the first question they ask us is, what were you doing in the 6-6 precinct chasing these guys, So we were like, listen, we saw them when we were on the borderline and we ran the plate and they took us into that area. So the commanding officer of the 7-0 was pissed that we got into a chase in another precinct, basically. And don't forget, there was all this damage. The guy had taken out someone's fence. They had garbage pails, cars, there were tow trucks. So it left like a trail of disaster. And throughout the whole thing, your heart's pumping and, you're all pumped up with this energy, you're trying to get these guys. So now you start to come down and you start to realize what you've just been through. So now detectives show up from the 6-6 precinct, and the detective who was assigned to the case was a detective by the name of Eddie Ailing. Great guy. He passed away now, Eddie. So we wind up back in the 6-6 precinct. He starts going through all his case folders, and he says, I think I know who these guys are. We had a rash of burglary, a rash of robberies, and we've been looking for these guys, and they're known to us. They can't tell us who it is because if we look up the picture, they want to do a lineup and stuff, so they don't tell us who it is. A day or two goes by, they call us up and they go, "We're going to do a lineup. We have the guys in custody. We believe they had recovered the car. Like I said, there was numerous pocketbooks from previous robberies that they did between the back seat and the trunk. So they didn't capture them in the car, but they knew who they were. And so Eddie Ailing had them in custody. So they bring us in to do the lineups, and both lineups were conducted and we hit on both guys. They were both arrested. And believe it or not, the driver of the car was the one that was taking the weight for the whole stolen car and the chase, all the reckless endangerment charges and stuff like that. But the passenger was only going to be able to be charged with the robberies that had occurred. Now, when you're dealing with senior citizens, most of them were elderly senior citizens, and it all happens in a flash. The guy jumps out before they even realize that the purse is out of their hand or off their shoulder, whatever it is, or out of their shopping cart. The guy's back in the car and he's taken off. So there was very few complainants that could ID. So the passenger was ID'd, I believe, in one or two of the robberies. He went off to jail. However, the driver, who was responsible for, like I said, the stolen car and the reckless endangerment, he decided to go to trial. So we go to trial, and he produces a time card at trial. And the time card shows that he was clocked out for lunch at the same time that this chase was going on. And the location where he worked, I believe it was like an automotive warehouse or some type of a warehouse. It was maybe 3, 4, 5 miles away from where the chase had occurred. So the DA tried to say that even though he was on lunch from 12 to 1, let's say, and the chase happened at, let's say, 12:10 to 12:15, that even though he was 4 or 5 miles away, he could have gotten to the location and gotten back to work in time because he was clocked back in. They produced this time card at trial. And unfortunately, the jury bought it, and he was acquitted of the reckless endangerment and the stolen car charges. But there was some robbery charges that he faced that was separate from the stolen car and the reckless endangerment charges. But when your adrenaline is flowing, like as the chase was going on, Your adrenaline's pumping and everything's happened in split seconds. And I think a lot of what we did is all from training and reaction. And you don't really have, like, when I saw those reverse lights coming on and I saw this car coming at me. I mean, I'm talking about a split second before I could even start to move myself out of the way. Joe had pushed me, and he pushed me to the left, and I went to the right. So I always credit Joe with saving my life that day, because I think had another split second gone by, I might have been under the wheels of that car. And the funny thing about that is that was March 1st, 1985, and Christmas Day of 84, which was only a few months before. Joe and I had been in some fierce battle with a guy wielding a knife, and the guy was about to plunge the knife into him, and I hit the guy with my nightstick. That's a whole another story for another day. But I actually saved his life a few months before, and then he saved mine. So we kind of, go back and forth with that. We still remain in touch till this day. We're close friends, and I actually owe him a call. He called me yesterday, and I sort of missed call. So when we get off, I'm gonna give him a buzz back.
Right. Man.
So yeah, that was a pretty crazy, a pretty wild. I mean, listen, it wasn't at the caliber of the Gene Hackman French Connection
Right.
car chase, but I mean, that's movie. It's dramatized. That's television, movies, whatever you want to call it, motion pictures. And that car was barely drivable after that chase. Like I had said, I had hit into him a couple of times. The tow trucks had hit into him. He had crashed into a few vehicles along the way, and they weren't really bad. In other words, he didn't total out. He sideswiped a car here, hit a car there, and then the real damage that he did was on that block where we cornered him, where he crashed into cars and garbage pails and the fence, like I said. So it was, I guess, it was the real life version of a really, really, really very intense car chase.
And you know something, when people think of car chases and police, you think of like LA, because every other day, breaking news, we have a car pursuit. And you see it, and it's commonplace for the LAPD. That's about as common as a man with a gun call for them. But in New
Right.
York, you don't think of that, because even though there's traffic in LA, I don't know, there's like a little bit more latitude to move through the streets over there as opposed to New York. New York, everybody's on top of each other. So
Yeah.
to have a car pursuit of that caliber in New York City, I mean, I guess when people ask about vehicle pursuits, you have that story to tell them.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's what you said. The city's a little more congested.
Yeah.
Brooklyn at that time, Borough Park, 13th Avenue. That's like a very busy business district. Um, I kind of left out something about the cops on the horses. The cop who was thrown from the horse was injured, but he wasn't seriously injured. Thank God the horses were okay. These guys were desperados. They weren't about to stop for four cops on horses. They weren't about to stop when tow trucks were cutting them off and crashing into them. They weren't about to stop when he spun out, and like I said, he wound up jammed up against the car on the corner of 39th Street and 13th Avenue. And my intention was to try and, take out his rear tire. That was where the rear wheel drive car, that's where the power was coming from. So if I took out his rear tire, that might have slowed him down or maybe, made him stop. But I hit him a couple of times. And what I was doing, like I said, I actually freed the front part of his car from being jammed in on that parked car that he hit. So the tactic didn't work out the way I wanted it to. It actually freed him from, from being jammed in. But it is what it is. Thank God we were okay.
Yeah.
Nobody got seriously hurt. That woman was, I never got to see her. She just, scooped up her kids and left. She was probably traumatized by the whole thing. And the older gentleman, he was kind of in shock when that stop sign came slamming down right behind him. I mean, missed him by inches,
Mm.
And so he was very fortunate. Thank God nobody really got hurt other than that cop that was thrown from the horse. And like I said, he wasn't seriously injured. So it was a good day for the NYPD. That were, Detective Ailing, who had the case. He put it all together. Like I said, he had been, it was a robbery pattern, and he had been looking at this guy, Johnny Rios and Frank Cintron for these robberies. He already had them in his sights, and it was just a matter of finding them, bringing them in, and then doing the lineups and stuff.
You only do that though. I mean, for them to go on a car chase like that, it makes sense what you explained earlier because you only do that if you're on crack.
Yeah,
I imagine when they're getting collared. So why'd you do it, crack? Everything else stops. It's the perfect explanation. So, wow. I know this is an unusual matinee edition of the Mike DeMathan podcast, but I promise Phil I'd bring him back, and this story did not disappoint. And you know something? They could be listening to this, any current MOS out there, and it could serve, even though there's not really vehicle pursuits now, it could serve as an instructional piece, if you will, because we have had cops in New York City get killed in vehicle pursuits. I brought it up last episode with Tony Giorgio from the ceremonial unit.
sure.
Nick Demutis in 1994, he got
Yes.
killed in that pursuit. John Kelly in 2000 on Staten Island chasing a stolen motorcycle. So, especially in more crowded neighborhoods, this is a good measuring stick of what to do and what not to do so the future generations are safer.
Absolutely, Mike. I think that vehicle pursuits are very, very dangerous. I mean, when you start to get into a pursuit, and you want to get the guy, whether it be a stolen car, what he's wanted for. In this case, it was a felony warrant, so they weren't going to call off the pursuit. The good thing was that nobody got hurt, but in retrospect, had he run into those horses, God forbid, I mean, the horses, the officers, it could have been very tragic.
Yeah.
But like I said, it was a felony that they were involved. I think there was like 30 purse snatches that these guys had been on a tear that they were wanted for. It was right at the beginning of the crack epidemic. These guys were obviously severely addicted to crack. I remember the passenger, Frank Cintron. He was really emaciated. The driver was a little bit more. I don't know if he was addicted to the crack or he was maybe just starting with the crack, but he seemed a little bit more cognizant of what to do. And he was the driver of the car and all of that. If there's a lesson to be learned from this, sometimes maybe it's better to just pull back a little bit and wait for them to catch them another day. I mean, at that time in my career, I wasn't about to let anybody get away so easily. That's just the young mind, and it was just I was a young, active anti-crime cop, and I wasn't about to let him get away so easily. I was involved in another pursuit in 1986, which wound up becoming a shootout. So there's a lot of danger in it, and listen, the worst thing that could ever happen in a vehicle pursuit is if that vehicle that you're chasing strikes and hurts somebody or killed somebody that's innocent, that's uninvolved in it.
Yeah.
Obviously, that would be the worst case scenario. So you got to think about those things. A lot of times I know cops get PO'd, they get pissed that, if there's a pursuit and the supervisor, the sergeant, the lieutenant, whoever, they call it off. I've heard COs call off pursuits, stop chasing that vehicle. The vehicle chase that in 1986 that I was involved in, it was actually had been somebody else was chasing the vehicle, and we had gone. I was in anti-crime again, and we had gone into the area, and the pursuit was called off. We didn't have, we were in anti-crime. We didn't have the light on the car or anything, and the guy just, I didn't realize it, but the guy we were driving on Cotillia Road, let's say in an easterly direction. He was coming west, and he must have made us as, it was a Grand Fury. So it was easy to figure out that it was a unmarked police car, and he tried to crash into us. So when I swerved out of the way, we put it over. We made, I whipped a U-turn and we started to go after them, and we put it over. In Central, they tried to crash into us. So now the pursuit was back on, and they spun out and they wound up firing shots at us. We returned fire, and one of the guys was shot. And so, again, very dangerous. When speed comes into these things, a vehicle traveling at 60 miles an hour on a residential street is a 4,000-pound bullet when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If it, strikes a human or another vehicle, obviously there could be serious injuries or death. So that's one of the things you got to take into consideration. I don't know what they teach in the police academy now, but it's probably if things start to get where the person you're chasing is becoming reckless and using high speeds, it's maybe time to tap the brake and let the guy off and get him another day. Just like in my case, Eddie Ailing, the detective, wound up catching both guys and took him into custody without incident. We were able to identify him in the lineups, and it was we got him another day. I know the young cops ain't gonna want to hear that what I'm saying, but that's probably the best advice I could give in situations like that.
And with all the cameras now and technology, I mean, you'll believe me, you'll get him another day. You'll
Oh
be,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. That the technology today between cell phones and Manhattan has plate readers everywhere and cameras everywhere. You cannot get into Manhattan with a vehicle and not be picked up on a plate reader. So, and there's other areas of Brooklyn and the outer boroughs that also have these traffic cameras, plate readers, and then there's just everybody's surveillance equipment that's between Ring doorbells and just home security systems. So there's a vast amount of technology that, like you said, you can enlist to identify and capture a perpetrator in something like this.
All right. Well, this was fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for coming back. I appreciate you taking time out your
Yeah,
schedule to be here.
I'd just like to give a shout out to the podcast that I'm on with Bill Cannon, Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. We're going to be doing a couple of episodes this week related to an episode of The Last Gangster. It's really talking about Sammy the Bull that was on uh, national television recently. So we're going to have Tommy Dades and Mike Vecchione. Tommy Dades was an organized crime NYPD detective. He was an organized crime expert. And Michael Vecchione was a veteran prosecutor in the Brooklyn DA's office, probably about 30 years of prosecutorial experience. He had a lot to do with the mob cops and several other high-profile cases. So we're going to do two shows. We're going to do one tomorrow night at 9. We're going to do one Thursday night at 9, kind of dissecting and taking apart what was discussed in The Last Gangster. And, we'll have the inside insight onto, the reasons that deals are made with informants to get other people, the higher up, the hierarchy of organized crime. And we'll talk a little bit about the prosecution and what it actually did to the New York area organized crime, the mob in New York, how it impacted them, the testimony, obviously, of Sammy the Bull Gravano.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I was texting with Bill about it yesterday, and he's excited about it. So, no, you guys always do a good show together, and Tommy's great. So to see Tommy back on the show twice this week, it'll be fun because he brings a
Yeah.
unique perspective given the high-profile cases that, as he said, you worked. So on my end, of course, this is not the only show I'll be doing today. Later on tonight, come right back because at 7 o'clock, I'm debuting a new miniseries. You guys know if you follow the show, I got a miniseries on ESU. I got one on the Bomb Squad. I got one on the FDNY. I'm starting a new one on the hostage negotiation team, and I'm speaking with Gentleman Jack Cambria, for Volume 1. So, yeah, he's a good man indeed. So come right back, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time today for Volume 1 of Talk to Me, Life on the NYPD's hostage negotiation team. Shout out to the live chat. Let's look who's here. Margaret Hearn, always a big supporter of the show. My sister, Jailene Michelle. The Truth. Peter Pranzo, Billy Ryan, Aunt
Good
Bibi,
people.
Lake Lizard. Yep, Raquel Pranzo, looking for some more people so I don't miss anybody. Ruth Ann Griffin, good to see you as always, my friend. Factual Breakdowns here. And I hope I will see you guys again, like I said, 7 p.m. tonight, Eastern Standard Time with Gentleman Jack Cambria. In the meantime, on behalf of Phil Grimaldi, I am Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. See you tonight.
Stay safe, everyone.